Let's have a session on 16 markers. This is for AQA A-level business. Let's go through the tips, the technique, and finish up with some model answers. So, tips. Tip number 1, know the command words. To what extent? That's what it's likely to be. Here's a type of structure that you may well see. To what extent do you think it is essential for the business to do X? And X is really the question. X is the concept that you need to figure out. It could be contingency planning. It could be cutting prices. It could be anything to do with the marketing mix. It could be many things. To what extent? Well, that means that you need to evaluate. The question really is it essential or is it not essential? But you need to evaluate within that, and you need to also make a conclusion. So 16 markers are going to feature in paper 2 and paper 3. And 16 markers will always come with a case study. You're likely to get a bunch of 16 markers. They will always come with a case study. Let's move on to tip 2. So know how to evaluate. Here's some ways you could evaluate. It depends on, however, if X information was provided, it would be more certain. In the long term, in the short term, this may be the case in this industry, or in this year, or in this context, but not in this other scenario. Number 3, watch out for the dodgy word. It's common to have a dodgy word planted in the question that you can evaluate and conclude off of. Sometimes that dodgy word will be in bold, sometimes it won't be. The main thing is you're looking for it. Here's some examples. To what extent do you think it is essential for a business to do X? Well, essential is clearly a word that you can evaluate off of. It's a very strong word. It's a bit dodgy. To what extent is X a profitable decision for all businesses? For all businesses is a massive statement. To what extent is X a good way for any business to react? Likewise there, that's a really loosens the question up, because if it's for all businesses or for any businesses, well, there's clearly going to be a scenario where it's not the case, or it is the case. So you can definitely evaluate and conclude off of that. Tip number 4, know the mark scheme. Play the game. Logical chains are needed to show a depth and range of knowledge, so do them. Logical chains must be in context, so do them. And make sure your logical chains look at a balanced range of issues. So use different bits of the case study, of the context, to show balance in your answer, that you get both sides of the argument. Make a judgment. So important. Make a judgment on these 16 markers and ensure that judgment follows the narrative built in the logical chains. Tip number 5, for 16 markers you need to be thinking 19 to 22 minutes. If you've got extra time and it's plus 25%, then 24 to 27 minutes. So firstly, master the suggested structure, and we'll get to some technique in a minute. And secondly, practice these questions under time constraints, and you will get better at them and you will smash them. Tip number 6, plan before you answer. Plan before you engage. And a way to think about planning is fade. So here's an example question. To what extent do you think it is essential for the business to do X? Maybe X is contingency planning. You want to do a fade, you want to do a plan before you start. Think about the for, the against of that, what the dodgy word is, and what the evaluation may be, because it will help you make your answer more concise and more effective. So if I think about this in the case of X being contingency planning, well, it could be for contingency planning. Well, you need to do it because of the dynamic nature of business. Maybe it will help maintain the stability in a crisis, or maintain sales, maintain the brand in a crisis. Against could be the high costs that you need to incur to do contingency planning, for the labour and the time that's involved. And also it might not be accurate. The dodgy word clearly is essential, but just note it to yourself as part of your fade. And your evaluation, what are the evaluative points you're going to make? Well, it could be the size of the business, the industry they operate in, and the available finances that the business has to do contingency planning. So if you do a quick fade before you start, it will help you with your technique. And here is the suggested technique. Do your fade, do your planning first. Then, in your first opening paragraph, try and anticipate your conclusion. Do a quick answer. In 2 or 3 sentences, just answer the question. So important you do that, because if you can do that, that's evaluation straight off the bat. Examiners love that. Then you want to start with your traditional on one hand and go through one side of the argument with a full, big, fat, logical chain. Just one strong logical chain. And then you want to look to evaluate. Remember the evaluation ideas earlier on. So that's logical chain 1, that's strong. And then you want to take the other side of the argument. So on the other hand, and another strong logical chain. And then evaluate that logical chain, making sure that you're evaluating throughout. And that helps make your answer even more powerful. And of course, with these questions, there has to be a winner. There has to be a judgment. There has to be a conclusion. And just do your AJKO for that. But we'll get to that in a sec. Let's talk about logical chains. So a logical chain plus evaluation. Number one, make the initial point. Maybe you want to paraphrase the question back to signal to the examiner that you understand what we need to talk about here. Then with your logical chains, explain the point in depth. Maybe you could use a because leads to, furthermore, like in a 9 marker here. Number 3, ensure the explanation is in context to the data, in context to the case study, in context to the industry. And number 4, make sure you have a mental check to yourself that the final sentence of your logical chain just curls back to the precise question. So you're really keeping it on the straight and narrow. You're keeping it on the path to success. And then always evaluate. So the plus evaluation, so you're thinking your either, your it depends on, however in this industry, if this information was provided, in the short term, the long term, you know the business. Now let's get to AJKOs. So with AJKOs, if the question was, to what extent do you think it is essential for the business to do X, then you need to answer the question. Is it essential or is it not essential? That's the question. Then you want to justify why. Provide some support. Use the application to do that. Then with the K, what's the key problem with your answer? Maybe it depends on something. Maybe there's a trade-off. Show some balance, as we said with tip 4 earlier on. Then with the O, overall, why is it the winner? With all these questions, there needs to be a winner. Why is yours the winner? Come back with more. Maybe you'll talk about the short and the long term. Maybe you'll talk about other industries here, because sometimes with those questions it says talk about another business, talk about all businesses, talk about any businesses. We saw of those questions earlier on, and that gives you your scope to pull out your big moves, pull out your big application, show that you know more about other businesses beyond just the case study, because it said all businesses, it said other businesses, it said you can talk about everything you know, and that's when you can really show it off right there, obviously in context to the question. So let's move on to some model answers. So we've got some model answers here. We've got 3. We've got contingency planning, paper 2, 2018, question 2, part 3. E-commerce, paper 3, 2018, question 4. Watch out for that one. Exchange rates, paper 2, 2018, question 2, paper 3. I hope that helps, and I'll see you at the next sesh.